man. I have stepped off into the deep end. I'm going after the health board. We're addressing the state of emergency and executive powers.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brandon Lewis, founder of the Tennessee Conservative, and I'm joined today by Jason Zachary, who represents District 14 in the Tennessee General Assembly. He's here to discuss House Bill 7, which limits the authority of health boards, not to be confused with health departments, which I'm sure Jason will explain. Jason, welcome to the program, and thanks so much for being here to speak with us about this bill, bud.
Good morning, Brandon. Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
So tell us about House Bill 7, what it proposes and why you are sponsoring it. I know you represent an area that's very close to or in Knoxville, correct?
Sure. Yes, sir. I'm in Knox County. I'm deep west Knox County.
Yes, and they have been very vocal about the health board up there, both at the county commission level, and now you're bringing this in on the state. Talk a little bit about why it's important and what it means.
Sure. Yeah, and Brandon, for your viewers that don't know, here in Tennessee, we have 95 counties. 6 of the counties have their own independent health department. And as this pandemic began, governor declared a state of emergency. It revealed an imbalance in government and really just a error in code that needed to be corrected. TCA 68 gives enormous authority and power to the health boards in those 6 counties. So the governor's executive orders have only applied to the 89 counties, while the other 6 counties are being run by their health board / health department, Knox County being one of those. It's the big 4, Shelby, Davidson, Knox, Hamilton, and then Sullivan and Madison, basically the 6 most populated areas in Tennessee. And so what we found is TCA 68 basically gives the health board the ability to issue orders, mandates, and then function as the executive by executing those laws without our elected officials having any recourse. So our Mayor Jacobs here in Knox County, who has objected to so many of these business closures, mandates, quarantines, he's objected to almost all of them and has been fighting for the people of Knox County. He literally, legally has no recourse. And then the one thing we've discovered is that most people thought these health boards gained their power from the state of emergency declared by the governor, and that's not the case. And that's why House Bill 7 is so important, because if the governor ends his state of emergency at the end of this month, next month, whenever that is, hopefully sooner rather than later, these health boards can continue on in their oligarchy rule of our counties without the governor being able to do anything. So here in Knox County, the governor has in his office have stepped in a couple of times with some of the overreach of the health board to be able to stop them. Specifically, they were going to try to force people to wear masks during elections, which is basically a civil rights violation. You can't force people to do something if they're going to vote. You can't infringe on their right to vote. And so the governor's office kind of stepped in and stopped that. But if we're not under a state of emergency, the governor has no power to stop these health boards, and they can continue on in quarantine, closing businesses, and negatively impacting our economy, shutting people's down, pulling away their liberty. And House Bill 7 changes that. House Bill 7 simply takes the section of TCA 68 that gives the health board their authority, and we're replacing the words adopt and enforce with advise. That's it. Adopt and enforce with advise. So it simply takes the health board, not the health department. It takes the health board and moves them to an advisory role, which is where they should be, to the county mayor. We're not saying that the counties don't need a health board, have a health board. We need medical experts to be able to walk with us. Every executive, whether it's a company, whether it's government, you need the experts to walk with you and provide you counsel. And that's absolutely where they should be, but they should be in an advisory role. And so House Bill 7 fixes an imbalance in government. And Brandon, the last point of House Bill 7, the second part of House Bill 7, because I've got an amendment that is drafted that actually makes the bill. So the language that people see right now at House Bill 7 is not the completed bill. I have an amendment that actually makes the bill. But the second part of that, right now, the county mayor has the authority only during a state of emergency to exercise some of these powers. So that exists right now in code today. So what we're saying is that when we remove that power from the health board, we're making it really clear that the county mayor has that power, but it can only be used during a state of emergency. So he can't just at any time start quarantining people, locking people down. He has that authority today in code, and we're just making it really clear that when we pull that power from these unelected health boards, and we can't let that power just rest out in nowhere, because someone will actually take that power at some point. So we're making it super clear that that power only rests with the elected county mayor, and then he can only use it during state of emergency. We've already had some conversations with our county commission about putting some parameters around those executive powers with the mayor, just like we're doing in the legislature this year with the governor.
Well, that is awesome. So another question I have just as a follow-up on this, and you seem to be speaking the language of your constituents. I can hear that. Many conservatives in Tennessee have really been kind of disappointed in the legislature's lack of involvement. It's been 12, I almost want to use an expletive there. It's been 12 months, and we've had like two dudes, basically, depending on where you live, two dudes out of millions and millions of people in Tennessee, two dudes saying, based upon what I'm seeing, this is a good idea for your health. And, for example, like our county mayor, I wouldn't take health advice from him, given he is a very unhealthy person. And so I'm thinking I don't need to be taking health advice from a county mayor and one other person. Like I voted for a state rep, I voted for a state senator, I voted for county commissioners, and everyone seems to be doing kind of what we do in politics, which is if it goes bad, we'll give the governor the blame. If it goes well, we'll say we were with him, and they can't really follow me. And so a lot of our state reps and state senators have not been vocal, waited 12 months. And it looked like the legislature went in to be neutered, and like they volunteered for the surgery, because they've had no legislative authority for the last 12, going on maybe 14, 15 months. So does the Tennessee legislature have any plans to become a co-equal branch of government again, and to put something in place so that if something like this rolls down the pike again, we won't have to wait for 12 months for people to get their courage in order to act? Because the special session could have been called months into this, and it never was. So talk a little bit about other bills, if you can, briefly, because we've only got 15 minutes left here, and I want to respect your time. What other bills are coming through that will limit things like this happening in Tennessee again, that really seem to be borderline unconstitutional?
Yeah, and Brandon, that is an awesome question, and you and I did not even discuss these. I had no idea before you and I jumped on what you're going to ask, but that literally is a perfect segue to another bill I'm carrying. So, man, I have stepped off into the deep end. I'm going after the health board. We're addressing the state of emergency and executive powers. I chaired the ad hoc committee over the summer that was responsible for reviewing this. So the legislature the speakers got together and said, this is something we need to look at. And I was appointed along with Senator Farrell Hale to review and bring witnesses in. We had 3 different ad hoc committee meetings. We had expert testimony from former Chief Justice Koch, former Attorney General Gonzalez, who was under President Bush. We had numerous constitutional experts over a 3-meeting span. And I'm carrying a bill as a result of that will do 5 different things. So well, let me back up. First, it's important to remember that I know there's frustration. I share the frustration of so many people, but TCA 58 was passed almost 30 years ago by the legislature, basically gives the governor unlimited authority during a state of emergency. The only thing, after we walked through this for 3 different meetings, the only thing the governor can't do is touch our guns. And people kind of laugh like, well, of course it's Tennessee, but that literally, with all sincerity, the only thing protected in statute under an executive power and in the state of emergency and executive powers is you can't touch our guns. So while there is some frustration, the governor has been measured and steady, because he literally could have done anything he wanted to do. And so we were one of the first states to open back up on April 27th, and we're one of the last to close. And so looking at it, and based on me being on so many of those calls and getting the information from Vanderbilt and these health experts, that first call we were on, we were told 250,000 Tennesseans were going to die. I mean, that's a pretty sobering moment. That was back in March of 2020. And that was the first call we were on. We were at the Capitol. They'd started closing things down, and they dropped that bomb on us. And so the information kept changing every couple of weeks. So it was literally an impossible situation to lead. And so I do appreciate the job our governor's done because he has been measured. Do I agree with every decision? No, absolutely not. But now to your question, to your point, there has to be some legislative engagement because we cannot, the precedent has now been set. So we cannot have emergency powers go on forever and ever, amen. So there's three different types of emergency powers. One is a security threat. One is a natural disaster like the floods we had in Nashville in 2010. And then there's the third, which is the health crisis / pandemic, which is what we're in now. So what we're doing is in my piece of legislation that I'm carrying that I've already filed, got the amendment ready to roll, and I'll be putting that on notice here in the next couple of weeks. We're recommending 5 different things. We are one of 12 states that has no legislative engagement in a state of emergency. We're one of only 12. So this legislation would insert the legislature in the process. It does 5 different things. One, and the most basic, which most states have, it says that the legislature can terminate a state of emergency at any time through a joint resolution. So period. We at any point can terminate a state of emergency. 2, the problem becomes, and this is recommendation 2, the problem for us becomes we are a part-time legislature, so we're only in Nashville January through May. So the second recommendation and part of this bill is that a legislative council will be formed, and at the 30-day mark of a state of emergency, this legislative council can put a stay on an emergency order until the full body can come back in and evaluate it. So that's if we're out of session, it gives us the option at 30 days to step in and put a stay on the state of emergency. Number 3 is that that 2 is optional. Number 3 is that a state of emergency cannot extend beyond 60 days, period. No state of emergency can extend beyond 60 days. There's some details that go along with that, but for the sake of time, I'll leave it there. The 4th is a reporting requirement, which all those who testified and provided testimony during our hearings recommended. It's a reporting requirement that requires the governor to give the legislature a 24-hour notice before any executive order is issued, and then requires him to provide us why he's doing it, guidance that will follow, and then what the cost is associated with that order. So the legislature knows every step of the way exactly what's being done, why it's being done. And then the 5th and final recommendation of this bill will be that the Department of Health has to come every other week, bi-weekly, and provide in-person testimony to our Government Operations Committee. So those are the 5 things that this bill does. And we basically are putting a box around the executive branch and saying that, yes, we understand that every branch has a role, and the execution of the law, the Constitution, that rests with the executive branch. We make the law, they execute. However, because a precedent has been set, we cannot ever again come to a point where our liberties are stripped away and businesses are made to be closed. Some businesses are deemed essential, some are not. It's essential for Kroger's essential, but yet the mom and pop grocery store is not. Never again could we have that in Tennessee. And so this piece of legislation puts basically a box around that. And that same box is what we're recommending for the 6 counties with their own health board, that they also do that same thing associated with their county mayors. Again, when you set a precedent like this in government, it's very hard to go back. And so now that the precedent's been set, we know this will happen again. And hopefully, God forbid, it never happens again in our lifetime, but it'll happen again. And so we as the legislature have to take the steps to ensure that we maintain our framework of ordered liberty, which is what government's role is. And that's what we're going to do with this bill.
Well, buddy, I appreciate it. That's a good summary. And this is the whole lockdown stuff's what brought me out of my political hiding hole. I'm not a protester. Hate them. Hate them. Not my bag, not my thing, but led one on the Market Street Bridge back in March. I could see what was going to happen in March. I could look at the data. A lot of people say it's incomprehensible to know what was going to happen. I could see it. That's why we were protesting. I think a lot of this stuff, I think, was morally reprehensible that we did, that were completely unequal, and we let it go on. And which leads me to the next thing is, and the final question that I just have for you is, boards of health, the CDC, left-leaning teachers unions have pushed the narrative that kids were at risk when no data was ever there to support any of that. We were already struggling in math and reading in the basics. Now the kids are, creeping further towards illiteracy. It's a problem we manufactured. and allowed to happen and agitated. I mean, the problem's already there. I know that we're dumb as usual. We just throw a bunch of money at it. That's always the solution. We've done that again, 40 years of throwing money at this thing. So, but what types of, succinctly, and we'll close on this, what types of solutions are, or is the legislature proposing, and shouldn't some sort of real meaningful school choice reform be at the top of that? Because, we were talking before we got on the call about your kid's 2013 Ford.
Yeah.
And sometimes when stuff doesn't work and you take it into the shop and you take it into the shop and you take it in the shop, you start talking about buying a different type of vehicle. And educationally speaking, a different type of vehicle is for people to be able to choose to flee fleeing schools. I live in a district where I can't send my children, where there's violence, drugs, educational performance. I don't think a single kid passed the ACT. I'm in an urban area in Chattanooga, and this is what we're spending $11,000 a year to force these kids in. And so the pandemic comes in and really, points further, I guess, exposes the failures of our public education system. So what's the legislature proposing in the last 2 or 3 minutes, which is really all we have here? And is school choice gonna see any light, and will Republicans actually fight for it?
Yeah, all good questions. To your point, 35% of third graders are reading on grade level. I mean, let that sink in for a minute. We as Republicans have, over the last 10 years, invested roughly $1.6 billion in additional money into public education. And we're still, as of today, roughly 35% of third graders are reading on grade level. That should be unacceptable to anyone. So school choice is a vital part of that. I was part of a controversial vote a couple of years ago related to school choice. I'm passionate about it. I think every parent should have a choice. It's not government has no authority or role to say you have to do this, you must do this. We should have the freedom, and Republicans should stand up for that freedom. And I don't know how this is a controversial issue. There are tax dollars, as you said, anywhere from roughly, I think, $9,700, something like that Tennessee spends average per student. The parent who is the taxpayer for those resources for their child should have the ability to put that child in an area, in a school, in an environment where they could thrive. But back to your question about what we've done, we just had a special session a couple of weeks ago. We looked at literacy loss, a literacy program, a learning loss program. There's some things that we passed a couple of years. I'll skip all the detail just for the sake of time. I know we only have a couple of minutes, but we passed those a couple of weeks ago. It does include some additional funding. It included a teacher's raise aspect. And so we spent an entire week focused just on education a couple of weeks ago during a special session, just to try to address these issues. But I think, to your point, until we have a truly robust school choice program, it's one of our challenges and obstacles to kind of take that next step. Because then again, when you have that school choice program, I know people don't like to say this, and most Republicans shy away from it, but it does create competition. It creates an environment where schools are striving for success to make sure they maintain their students, or they're trying to make the next step to attract students. And so we have to create an environment. We have to reject the narrative of the teachers unions that tried to keep our schools closed down. We as Knox County were the biggest school system open until recently, until Davidson. I believe Davidson just opened. We were the largest. We've had no issues. We were doing transportation of all our students. Brandon, we did not have one case as of last week, not one case contact traced to a school bus, and we're transporting tens of thousands of students across Knox County. We're the largest county in the state doing it, and we've had virtually no issues. And we've had a school close here and there. Of course, there's been some hiccups, but in terms of just, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, what the teachers unions and the TEA had proposed would happen has not happened. And schools are safe to open. Now studies are coming out. We have left and right saying that's the safest place for children to be. Kids are wearing masks. They're doing all these steps are being taken. We basically cured the flu is what it seems like. There's no flu cases. COVID cases have dropped dramatically. And Knox County is a model for the other metro areas to follow. And I think Hamilton's been open as well. But it's a priority. Education, healthcare are always two of the biggest things that we face as a state. And so it's a priority, and there'll be continued legislation moving forward as we look to address so many other challenges that we've got within education.
Well, Jason, we're just about out of time. I'm going to run my little commercial here. If you'd like to support the Tennessee Conservative, if you would go to the front page, hit that red support button, we'll send you 2 proud Tennessee Conservative bumper stickers for helping us get conservative news out in a state that, even though we lean red, is dominated almost exclusively by people who dislike our values and report on it negatively. And so, Jason, if we can ever have you back as a guest, you are doing something that takes a lot of courage, and that is number one, wanting to constrain, which is good. It's how our founders saw a more perfect government, constraining the executive branch, just as the executive branch should seek to constrain the legislature, so that we never are again moved by passions to the degree that we have been, because it has the economic, educational, psychological, and spiritual devastation that has been unnecessarily wrought, not by the disease, but by government regulation that was misguided, is amazingly large. And I think once the political dust settles, I know there's always a lot of revisionist history. I think people will look back at us as a culture that absolutely lost their damn minds this last year. So hopefully we can get back on track to normalcy. But if we can ever help you in any way, if you've got a bill that's being sponsored, any type of information you want to get out, we're 10,000 and growing, and by the end of next month, we should probably be up to 15, and we'll just keep moving throughout the year. And we thank you for your work, because it takes a lot. Between that and sponsoring a school choice bill, it shows that you are more worried about representing your constituents than anything else, which is a rare find. And that's coming from somebody that worked in politics professionally at the state, federal, and local level. So, Jason, what closing thoughts do you have for folks as we leave here?
Well, as we leave, I'd just say be encouraged, because Tennessee, we have rebounded economically in an incredible way. We're back in the top 3 in all major categories. We're again ranked as the most fiscally stable state in the nation. So economic unemployment just plummeted from, I think it was 14, it's down to 6. So economically, we're moving in the right direction. We have 246,000 jobs available in the state of Tennessee right now. That's triple what we have on the unemployment roll. So if you know somebody that's looking for employment, go to jobsfortn.org. There's we as the state have listed 246,000, and they're career opportunities, not just like, hey, I need to work at Subway. They're real career opportunities there. So there's so much employment opportunity. So be encouraged. But Brandon, quickly, the last thing I would say is that regarding schools, we have to do all we can also to protect our children spiritually, physically, the innocence of our children. So I've got a bill. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail right now. People can look it up under my bills on the Tennessee General Assembly website, but we're going to need conservatives' help. It's called the Accommodations for Children's Act, and it basically protects children who are using restrooms and locker rooms in schools. And there is a wave coming based on a President Biden executive order, and we have to do what we can and be proactive and be bold as Republicans are in the supermajority to protect the innocence of our children in our schools. And so I've got a bill to do that. We tried to pass it 5 or 6 years ago and couldn't get any traction because they said it wasn't an issue. Trump was president, so that kind of went away. It's full frontal now. And we also have Chairman Sapicki has got a bill right now kind of along those lines, that ensure that boys and girls are playing sports in they're participating in sports associated with their sex at birth. And so that just passed subcommittee last week. It'll go to, since we're basically going to be shut down this week, it'll go to full committee next week. So people need to be paying attention to those, Brandon, because we are a conservative state, so we got to pass conservative legislation, put some of this stuff to bed that we shouldn't have to worry about this in Tennessee. So please be engaged. Go to the Tennessee General Assembly website, reach out to your state rep, to your state senator. These issues matter because we got to do all we can to firewall and protect Tennessee from the absurd federal overreach that we're seeing right now.
I agree, Jason, buddy. We're just glad to have you on the program. We thank you for all the hard work that you're doing and fighting when it's not always easy and it's not always convenient. Going along to get along is the easiest way to stay in politics, but it is not a good way to make it. And so if you represent your constituents, you'll always make it. Jason, thanks so much. I'm Brandon Lewis with the Tennessee Conservative, signing off.